Climate force displacement is affecting communities in every part of the world. The UU office at the United Nations has been working with partners across the globe, hearing stories and learning ways that we might both prepare ourselves and advocate for others. Today, I invite you to listen to the stories and the new learnings with an open heart. It can be difficult to hold the impact of climate force displacement. I'm going to share more about our work and the actions that UUs and our partners are taking, as well as the things you can do today. Our Unitarian Universalist sixth principle calls us to build a world community with peace, justice, and liberty for all. Our partners in the Pacific Ocean nation of Vanuatu shared the effects of climate change in their community at our 2022 Multi-Generational Spring Seminar. Our speaker, Roma Beth Siri, explained that the climate crisis is causing impacts on fishing, saltwater inundation of underground water. In turn, they're seeing increasing food insecurity, and this and so much more is putting stress on the ability for the government and the social structures to be able to respond to the needs of the people. And that, in turn, is increasing the drivers of internal migration as people move from rural to urban areas. We've also spoken with our Unitarian Universalist siblings in faith in the Philippines, where there are 2 UU congregations who are watching the water come up to their village and to their church buildings. And they know that they are facing the need to move within just a few years. We have known for decades that rising global temperatures would lead to severe climate events, and we're beginning to experience those already, and the temperatures are still rising. Rising sea levels, flooding, extreme heat, drought, wildfires, and smoke and extreme weather events are resulting in unlivable land and entire populations needing to leave their homes. For so many communities, the threat of climate change is at the door, and they are rethinking how and where they can live or have already been forced to find safety. The floods in August of 2022 in Pakistan affected 33 million people. That's equivalent to the population of all the New England states, including New York. 7.6 million people have been displaced by those floods, according to the latest estimates. Across North America, we continue to see extreme weather events that are destroying homes and whole communities, threatening the safety of all of us. Personally, I've just moved to the Washington, D.C. area after living in Northern California for 6 years. There, the wildfires destroyed whole communities, and the smoke lasted for weeks at a time. In my home, all told in 2021, there were 6 weeks when the air quality was considered unhealthy for all groups. My family was privileged to have flexible jobs and savings in our bank account where we could drive for hours to escape the smoke. That smoke, and from wildfires in Washington and British Columbia, came together and stretched across the whole of Canada and the United States. On the East Coast, we see those hurricanes come in and flood and destroy whole communities. Hurricane Katrina was in August of 2005 in New Orleans, so many years ago now. And we understood after that our governmental response is not equal to all people, and that infrastructure has limits. We learned a city never fully recovers, and that finding new safe homes is a challenge. This year, The UU office at the UN joined other UU organizations, the UU Ministry for Earth, UU's for a Just Economic Community, Side with Love, UU's for Social Justice, and the UU Service Committee to issue a UU Statement of Commitment in response to climate forced displacement. I'd like to share just a few lines from that statement, and I hope you'll read it in its entirety and consider if your congregation might sign on. It reads, Unitarian Universalism is a faith tradition anchored in religious pluralism, the rhythms of nature, and the inherent worth and dignity of each person. The ongoing climate crisis challenges all of our core values as a faith tradition. Communities around the globe and in the U.S. are already facing the effects of climate destruction. Black, Indigenous, people of color, frontline, and other oppressed and marginalized communities who have done the least to contribute to climate crisis historically are facing the worst of its effects. Many of these communities have been displaced from their homes, and millions more will follow in the decades ahead. Climate displacement is already occurring around the world. Our leaders have a choice as to the pace at which it unfolds and the treatment of the people who endure it. We urge them to act now before even more people are deprived of their homes. Again, please read the whole statement and consider adding your congregation's name. For the UU office at the UN, these conversations are a top priority. In March of 2022, UN Secretary Antonio Guterres warned, "We are sleepwalking to climate catastrophe." And one important agreement from the 26th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, or COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland, was focusing on loss and damage. It was acknowledging that climate change is having increasing impacts on people, especially in the developing world, and countries agreed to strengthen a network known as the Santiago Network that connects vulnerable countries with providers of technical assistance, knowledge, and resources to address climate risks. Climate change is not currently recognized by the United Nations as a cause for someone to qualify as a refugee, so legal protections are needed on an international level to affirm the rights of these millions on the move. Even if refugees do find a home in another country, they are oftentimes found increased racist and xenophobic policies that make it difficult to thrive. While people are forced to move because of climate change, what happens to them after and whether or not they will find a safe environment to live is based on the effects from colonialism and current impacts of racism. The justice issues we face are intertwined. I know this is overwhelming and scary, and I don't want to be alarmist. Yet no matter where we are, the climate crisis will force us to evaluate our safety plan and what our response will be when the disaster comes to our door. Our partners on the ground tell us that we need to be prepared as individuals and as a community for what happens when the climate crisis causes displacement nearby. Do you have a personal disaster plan? Have you considered how you would leave and where you would go if flooding or smoke or extreme weather made your housing unsafe or unlivable? What would you lose? Who in your community would need extra help to ensure they are safe? These are the questions we must ask to prepare to protect ourselves and the people of our world community from climate-forced displacement. Unitarian Universalists have been taking action to protect the earth for decades, taking action to protect the people for decades, and this is the next step in our advocacy. Friends, there is action you can take today. The first is to take a deep breath. Go on, right now. Maybe one more. This is hard to hold, and we need to steady ourselves for the long haul. When you hear a news report about the floods in Pakistan or Nigeria, when you see stories of Florida rebuilding, when you walk out your door to the familiar haze of wildfire smoke, that is the moment for your spiritual practice. You might have a long developed practice, or you may just be hearing that phrase for the first time. Spiritual practice will ground you for what is to come. Maybe you pause for a solemn moment in acknowledgement of the people affected and the lives lost. Maybe you say a prayer. Maybe you go for a walk to reconnect with the beauty of creation, or maybe you make art or music. Maybe you journal about loss or about gratitude for what you have. Whatever it is that you do that connects you to something larger than yourself, do it. Do it. And then when your heart and mind is ready, you act. There are 2 letters you could sign today. The Unitarian Universalist Service Committee has a sign-on letter to tell President Biden to support climate justice at the UN. And our partners, the Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change, have a call to world leaders to vote yes on a UN General Assembly resolution to seek an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on climate change. After signing those letters, connect with Side of Love, the UUA's public advocacy. With one of their priorities being climate justice, they are helping UUs take action. Side with Love is committed to building communities of care in the face of climate disaster and have a webinar called Climate Resilience Through Disaster Response and Community Care. Keep learning, keep preparing. Unitarian Universalists have strong communities and strong networks across the globe. We are a resilient people and full of hope, and I know that our communities will be part of the solutions to come when we are called to action. Spiritual grounding and education and action move together in a cycle where we can name our fears and our hopes, continually deepen our own understanding, and expand the network of our care. This is our call for our world community as we face climate force displacement. Amen.